Sell me the dream on, hey, Patrick, you're 22 years old. I'm a regular guy. You know, my parents divorced. I don't have a lot of money. My dad's a cashier at a 99-cent store. I came from Iran. I lived at a refugee camp. I'm a regular guy. There's nothing about me that I'm coming with family money, any of this stuff. Sell me the dream. Hey, Patrick, you ought to one day, ... Sell me that dream. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I think you should do whatever it is that you want to do. And I think you should be able to have a shot to do that fairly. So, in other words, I don't think you should go bankrupt if you get medical bills. I don't think you should, have student loan debt that's so extensive that you can't ever pay it back. And by the way, you also can't file for bankruptcy on it because that's the way that they wrote the laws. I don't think people should be loaded up to the brim with credit card debt. Credit card debt is at a record high right now. I just read a stat the other day, 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So really, to sell you on the dream, I would honestly just point at some of the Scandinavian countries and say, look, they haven't eliminated capitalism. What they've done is they've harnessed the good parts of capitalism and mixed it in with the good parts of socialism so that they have, an intelligent hybrid where somebody who's 22 years old, just getting out of college, can have a chance to do whatever they want and make it.
So, okay, and I rebuttal because let's just say there's a classmate sitting there and his dad's an executive at IBM, hypothetically, and he's doing $600,000 a year and he lives in a nice community. Yep. He says, so Kyle, if my dad's told me if these Scandinavian countries are so great, how come you're not moving there? And why is it that 40 million immigrants choose to come to America? And why don't they choose to go to some of these countries? What do you tell that 22-year-old smart aleck?
Well, why I'm not going there is because it's fucking cold. I'm in Miami, and I'm enjoying being in Miami right now.
So if it was warm, you would go, is what you're saying?
No, because I love my country. I love America. Whenever I criticize America, it's coming from a place of, I want to try to improve it and make it better. I don't think everything about this country is bad or wrong, but I think that there are things we can do to improve it. And, there's a very famous quote from one of the founding fathers, dissent is the highest form of patriotism. In the same way that if, God forbid, we saw one of our kids behind a dumpster smoking crack behind an Arby's, we'd be like, you know what? We're going to try to get them some help. We're going to try to get you in rehab. We're going to work on this. We're going to fix this. It's that same mindset that you apply to the country. It's, when you look at some of the things going on in this country, you say, this can't continue. I mean, we have 45,000 Americans that die every year because they don't have access to basic health care. That's something we can fix. And there's a lot of work put into convincing people that it's just a law of nature and there's nothing we can do about it. No, there's a lot we can do about it.
Okay, so let's stay on that. Hang on one second. I want to stay on this. So I want to go to the 22-year-old and selling the dream to this kid. So going back to it, I don't know who we had here on the podcast, but somebody recommends a restaurant to you. How do you and I judge a restaurant at noon? Let's say, hey, you know what? I've never been to Rifle before. Let's go there to eat for lunch. How do you and I judge a great restaurant?
How the food tastes, how the atmosphere is. And
then, okay, so the atmosphere meaning what? If the place is packed at noon and there's 100 people there and 20 people waiting to get inside, they're doing something right, okay? If you and I go to a restaurant at night and you're like, there's a restaurant in L.A., Rafi's Place, I go there all the time. If you go there on Mother's Day, it's a 3-hour wait, okay? Every day it's busy. It doesn't matter when you go there, right? If anybody says anything bad about the restaurant, like to say, well, my thing is I want to make this restaurant better because I think this restaurant can do, if they put the chairs this way and it's not fair to the fact that the employees and the busboys and da-da-da-da-da, and I'm like, yeah, dude, but
it's a good restaurant.
But it's not a good restaurant because you and I have an opinion that's a good restaurant. It's a good restaurant because it's always flipping packed, right? So if America was, and I know this is a random analogy I'm using, but if America was a restaurant, America is so packed and it's got a waiting list that if it's so bad with the existing ideas that it has, why do so many people still want to come here and not anywhere else?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that question, which is if you look at the places that a lot of these people are fleeing, they've been absolutely obliterated. They've been destroyed. So a lot of these countries have been ravaged by the drug war, whether it's, I think in Honduras, I read a fact a couple years ago, in Honduras, there's more violence than there was in Iraq at the peak of the Iraq war. So
it's a pretty crazy place.
I'm going to try to flee that. Yeah. I don't know about you. I'm trying to flee that. I'm going to try to take care of my kids. Mexico, similar situation. You have these drug cartels. Effectively, with help from our policy, we've made these narco states, south of us.
Yeah.
And so you have these, gangster states that are run by drug cartels because what we've done is we did the war on drugs. We made it illegal. What happens when you make it illegal is it gets pushed underground to the black market. That's how you make the drug cartels more powerful. The same thing happened here with prohibition when it came to the mafia. We made the mafia way more powerful because we decided to make alcohol illegal. That's when they got their most power and wealth. And so a similar thing happened with the drug war. What I would do is, number one, stop intervening in those countries militarily. And that's, a long conversation we could have about the history of the U.S. intervening in that area. And number two, let's end the drug war. So in other words, just kind of take our boot off the neck of a lot of these countries and make it so that people want to stay there. Because honestly, I really believe this. I think a lot of the people who are coming here, if they felt like their home country was safe and clean and okay, then they wouldn't want to come here. I think in many cases it's a desperation type move.
But it's not just Honduras or Mexico. It's like, okay, you're half Italian and you're half Polish. Is it Polish or?
Yeah. So my mom's mom is from Italy, basically, and on my dad's side, it's more of my last name Kulinski is a Polish last name, but I think it's a little more confusing than that.
You got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I got a little bit of everything.
Okay, but I mean, even think you take your Italian, right? You take Jews, you take anything else you take. If America is so bad that some people sell it as being so bad, why do people keep coming here? What is so, like, okay, when we were in Iran, we had options. People were going to Spain. Some were going to Australia. Some were going to this. Only because they couldn't make it to America. But everybody's number one on the list was to come to America. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like they wanted to go anywhere else. Again, going back, that is my biggest argument, where if America is so bad, if capitalism is so bad and abusive, why do so many people who are actually leaving an abusive environment are willing to come to a place that offers capitalism, where a person who has not got the last name of Mitt Romney, his last name is Bet David, my parents haven't given me a penny. Last time I got an allowance, I was 14 years old. I'm not an allowance. I don't even know what allowance is, to be honest. I'm not even being sarcastic. I don't know what an allowance is, right? And so I come up here, I'm like, dude, I don't give a shit if you give me allowance. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm going to bring my Middle Eastern work ethic, and I'm banking on something's good going to happen to me. I don't have the money to go to school. I don't have the grades to go to school. Maybe I'm going to go in the military, get my act together, be away from some of these guys that are doing drugs, because a lot of my friends were, ecstasy, pot. They were selling. They were done. Like, I'm just got to get away from this. So I go into the military, and then I come out, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn how to. I was a bodybuilder. I'm going to learn how to sell. This is my way out. So again, for me, it goes back to the same thing. If socialism or social democracy is so amazing, why don't people go to those countries first before they come here?
Well, so I would say, number one, there is a refugee crisis in a lot of those countries. There are people kind of pouring into those countries. But number two, I think we're talking a little bit past each other, because I wouldn't say America's bad. Of course I wouldn't. I'm here. I love this country, right? The question is, I think it's just the wrong conversation to have.
You're not a capitalism guy. You're not a support.
Well, social democracy harnesses the best aspects of capitalism. Okay. So there is an element.
So maybe unpack the difference between the two.
Sure. So there's socialism, there's democratic socialism, and there's social democracy. Social democracy is a hybrid of capitalism and socialism, where basically you take the best aspects of capitalism, the best aspects of socialism, and you have this mixed system, which in theory would yield the best results. And the reason why I believe in that is because I think there's a tremendous amount of empirical evidence to those ends. So, like, for example, they do this study every couple of years, this Commonwealth Fund study, where they look into the healthcare systems of basically, a lot of the developed countries, 11 of the developed countries. And when they do that, we always rank, the U.S. ranks 11th out of 11. So we're doing worst on that front. So now when it comes to the issue of capitalism, look, I mean, I can make the argument for you here. When you look at, for example, the cars that came out of the Soviet Union, they were abysmal. They were made by one government agency. There was no competition, so you didn't get a better product at a lower price. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, which is why I believe in something like social democracy, because you can still have, particularly when it comes to consumer goods, I think it's good to have competition. I think it's good to try to get the best price with the best product and compete. In fact, I believe in, and I'm curious if you would agree with this, I think we really need to start doing antitrust action again. I think we should do anti-monopoly stuff again, because when a business becomes a monopoly, what do you get? Higher prices, worse product. And so you need to break them up, just like Teddy Roosevelt did, to get it to the point where you have more competition and you can harness the best aspects of capitalism. So when you talk about that, so I believe in that, while at the same time I also believe in taking care of the basics. So in other words, they have like sectoral bargaining in a lot of the Scandinavian countries. That means you set wages. The union negotiates with management and you set wages kind of across an entire industry. I think that's a good idea because it helps working people out more. I believe in, like I said, universal healthcare, universal education, or trade school. You should have your choice. And I think they do that in Germany. They give you an option. You want to go to trade school or you want to go to college. I just hate this notion that in this country, some people come out of college and they're $80,000 in debt and they're like, well, what the fuck do I do now? And I can't even pay this back. And then they got to go take a job where they're way overqualified to even take that job. I think that's fucked up. I just think there shouldn't be such a thing as medical debt or school debt. And I don't think these ideas are all that radical. I think most people would agree with this, even people who would consider themselves capitalists.
So let's go through the school debt.
Sure.
Let's go through the school debt. So who caused that? Like, meaning, how did we get here? Because 40 years ago, college wasn't that expensive. You know, if you look at the numbers of 40 years ago versus today, I think inflation, CPI is 220% in the last 40 years. Since 1970 or 1980, I think it's 1970. And then cost of college education has gone up 1,200%. CPI 220%, inflation 1,200%. How do we get to a point where college has become a business? It's no longer like what it once was started for.
Yeah, well, college was free or nearly free in California, and then Ronald Reagan came in and took that away. So it really is a matter of priorities. I think this is something that honestly should be fully nationalized. I think we should have a fully nationalized education system, trade school system. I think this is one of those areas where we've kind of experimented with the free market, and the results have been disastrous in the same way that I think for-profit health insurance companies are basically just a legalized mafia that's in between you and your doctor where they take their cut and they price gouge you. That's not every industry that would fall into that category. I think there are many industries where capitalism and competition works out for the better for people.
Yeah.
This is just not one of those industries, and I think the evidence bears that out.
So nationalized college. So I guess the question goes back to the following: if I got $1 billion, and you have a choice between giving $1 billion to free enterprise. Okay, let's give $1 billion to Elon. Let's give $1 billion to Musk. To Bezos. Let's give $1 billion to whoever that's in the free market. Take any of the top 200 guys that made it from zero to there. Okay, give $1 billion to them, versus giving $1 billion to the U.S. government and say, here, go see what you can do with $1 billion. Who do you trust will do more with that $1 billion?
Well, it depends on the topic, right? So I would give the money to the government when it comes to pharmaceuticals, because a lot of people don't know this, but for the past 2 decades, there hasn't been a single drug that hasn't been developed with government grant money. So basically, the government steps in, gives money to universities and says, hey, we need this new drug which does X, Y, or Z, and then they create it. And then you have the pharmaceutical companies swoop in, buy up the patent rights, and then sell it back to everybody at a profit, even though they didn't fund the research and development. So my answer would be, it's a complicated question, and it depends on it depends what we're talking about. There are plenty of areas where I'd say, yeah, give that money to an entrepreneur.
Give me an idea. Be more specific. Give me an idea. Like I'm actually really. You're a smart guy. You're a very well-read guy. You have strong opinions, and this is your world. I'm actually curious to know. So, if I gave $1 billion to public versus a private, in what areas you think? So one was pharmaceutical fair. What else would you think they would do good versus they would do bad? Like it's better to put it in a free enterprise.
Well, the other, I actually just gave the example before. I think with like cars. The government should have no business in cars.
So cars
no business
put a free
in
enterprise.
Yeah, of course. No business in, I don't want the government building like furniture or some shit. That's something that's squarely for
technology,
for the private sector. Tech, I think, is a little more complicated because a lot of the products that we use today that we kind of take for granted, like stuff like these phones, a lot of that was originally developed with funding from NASA. So in some ways, the government actually does science and technology very well. But to your point, yeah, there's plenty of entrepreneurs and private investors who would probably do it just as well, if not better, on some topics.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.